Hello, I'm going to start this show out this week by saying I have begun to clinically understand, and Kasie's with us, so Kasie, I would say, I've really begun to understand the topic tonight is a very sobering one. It's a very powerful one because I've developed the opinion that when a long-term relationship, especially marriage, is ending, it is one of the most decompensated periods of time people get into, meaning they are feeling at their lowest, feeling at their most vulnerable, feeling at their most desperate. I've just kind of intrinsically begun to believe and see and experience that. I'll be curious what you see about that, Kasie, in a little while, but I really wanted to introduce this show off the get-go that way so that this show hopefully will give you some hope at a time that feels so desperate. So if you're tuning into this particular episode and you're struggling with your marriage or a long-term relationship, please understand we're going to kind of help you through that time, knowing that it is one of the most difficult times that I kind of believe people get into. So off we go. This is Through a Therapist's Eyes. I am a mental health and substance abuse therapist that has a book out, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. We welcome you to this podcast where I like to say you get personal insights from a therapist in your own car or personal time in your car. We invite you to see the world through the lens of a therapist. In this month, we have 2 therapists that are doing the show together. But being aware is not the delivery of therapy services in any way. Help us by subscribing to the show. And I really want to thank the listeners. Y'all make this show what it is. And I don't say that enough, so I've begun to be aware. We thank you for tuning in and sharing it with your friends and people that might benefit. Pop the 5-star reviews on Amazon, or not Amazon. Amazon, too, would be good to get reviews for Through a Therapist's Eyes, but on Apple iTunes and wherever you get these podcasts. So this is the human emotional experience where we endeavor to figure this thing out together. Sound good?
I think it sounds great. Yeah.
All right. We're winding down with you, I guess. So we got one more next week, and then we're transitioning to another co-host. Is that right?
I think that's correct. Yeah. One more
I've
show.
enjoyed doing this with you, Kasie. It's kind of fun to have our clinical brains on it. And I kind of randomly came to you, I think yesterday, where as if you follow the show, you'll know that Kasie is a therapist, and it's been awesome. You know, you're doing the show prep, which is nice, so I get to follow along a little bit more and be a little bit more just genuine and fresh in the moment. I've enjoyed that. But I came to you like yesterday and just kind of popped this idea to have 2 clinical minds on this very important topic, one of which, yet again, I cannot believe we have not done a show on divorce recovery or anything like that. I feel like I failed because this is a big one, y'all. This is a really important show. I started a show off the way that I did for that reason. What did you think about that? I am curious.
Yeah.
Clinician to clinician.
At first, I was like, you going through something?
Yeah.
Like, y'all right? But then I really realized that, we see a lot of couples that come in from all different aspects of relationships, from beginning relationships to ending relationships. And I think there's a lot out there about being your best self in a relationship, but there really isn't a lot out there about what happens when it ends.
Yeah. No.
Like where to go, what to do.
There are divorce recovery programs and services and stuff that's out there, but I agree, there's not a lot.
Right. And so
that sucks.
And so I was like, you know what if we did take a deeper dive into this? And since this is us kind of just going back and forth together, talking through it, and we're both married people, Neil's also married. So I think it's interesting to have these perspectives and perceptions about how this is going and what this is looking like. I'd like to remind any audience members that are watching us live right now on Facebook that if you have questions, Neil is going to take them down and ask us maybe even throughout the live casting of the show.
Yeah,
so
a little spit on that real quick. We've been talking
Yeah.
about it before. I finally figured out how to log in on my computer, so it enables us to do that. So we are experimenting with that, but you can get used to it by usually we record about 5:30. I guess your months we recorded about 6:30. So you'll get used to some routines, and that'll be kind of fun to do. So where are we at? You know, it's funny. I like that you do definitions. It's natural, isn't it? When you're kind of getting geared into this thing, it's like, well, let's start with what are we calling this and all. So I thought that was neat, by the way.
Yeah, so we really just want to kind of jump in to thinking about divorce recovery and other relationship endings, right? So, and when we're talking about the termination or the ending of a relationship, we're kind of going to cover divorce, breakups of kind of long-term relationships, because now I do see a lot of couples that stay in very healthy long-term committed relationships that do end, short-term fast but firm relationships where it was kind of hot and heavy and passionate in the moment and then it just goes away, and how that feels. And then also the concept of ghosting, where you think that things are going well and then the
And then,
person never calls you again.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, ghosting. I am familiar with that term. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, I did
My
ask
little-
Chris
my
before
little-
we started.
My
Hey, do you
little
know what
Gen
ghosting
Xing
is?
over here.
Yeah.
I knew ghosting. You know, a little bit of a prompt too. Prompt? I don't know what that is. I did want to highlight the show too that we did. It came up actually in therapy just today. Did an initial assessment with somebody and really referred back to, if you're listening to this one, I really think that it'd probably be good to check out. And it was very early on where we did a recovering from an affair.
Oh yeah.
And that was a really good show. Probably one that we should redo to make it more recent, exposed, because a lot of times these things do go hand in hand. So that was a really good show to recover from an affair. That's a whole nother. We took a really good deep dive on that very early on in the history of our show.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because we're not going to go into in depth into the nuances of why people get divorced. We're really looking at the divorce has already happened.
Right, there you go.
And the
Right.
relationships have already ended. And that's what we're kind of,
clarification.
and that's what we're jumping into today. And so, like you said earlier, and I love the word hope, right? Because
Yes.
I am a hopeful person. Whenever somebody comes into my office, I think hope is what
Gotta have it.
really drives my call into this work, to be completely honest. And so I think that that's our focus today, is hope and the word recovery.
Yeah.
And so my next definition is, when we
Okay.
talk about recovery, what are we going to kind of cover today? And so really defining recovery, and this is straight from the internet, probably Wikipedia or something like that,
Dr.
Webster's.
Google.
Dr. Google. It's basically, this is the rudimentary definition of the word recovery: a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. And I love that word, strength.
Absolutely. I know you do.
A return to a level of strength.
You
And I
would've just
love how
lost
it
if
said,
they said resiliency, wouldn't you?
you know it.
Just lost
In
it.
fact, when we were coming up with a title, I was throwing out the word resiliency every time I could, and Chris was like, okay,
Enough.
stop doing that. So, but also the secondary definition I actually love too, because it says the first word, the action or process of regaining control of something that has been stolen or lost,
Yeah.
is recovery. And so I do know that that's more so like the recovery of property, but we love metaphors,
Well,
right?
yeah, and let me jump in there and
Yeah.
just highlight maybe some helping people that are going through this, understanding the behaviors that you go through and what's normal, because a lot of these things, as with a grief and loss experience, by the way, grieving is a big part of this, and loss, there is a very huge normal behavior of recovering some semblance of control over your life. You're going to go to that junk closet and you're going to clean it out. Well, I hope my brother doesn't mind, but I recall, like, he's not the homemaker kind of person, but when he went through his divorce, he is scrubbing his shower, down, just to the inch, just because that you're just going through a major change that you just lose a semblance of control over your life. And so a very normal thing to do is to try to get what that definition is talking about.
Right. And that recovery process. And so, what is, Chris, the recovery process when it comes to relationships? Like, what kind of comes to mind? And I don't want you to unpack everything, but just from your brain, when I immediately say relationship recovery or divorce recovery, what kind of comes to mind?
Will I be okay?
I love that. Yeah.
Right? I started to show off kind of saying, like, people are at their most decompensated state in life. And I think it's because, to a fundamental level, and we dialogued a little bit about this. I'm sure it's going to come up a few times. But, when you get married, not just a long-term relationship, but when you get married, like, the two become one, right? They talk about. So, like, when the one becomes like no longer one, you lose what? Like your better half, right? You're losing like half of your entity. If you think about it in those existential terms, like I think that's why this is so powerful for people. And it's just fundamentally like, I can't breathe. I can't function. I am now grieving. I am destroyed. I am not okay, and I'm not going to be okay, and I'm never going to be okay because I'm never going to be the same. Like it's a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really, really, it's a dark time. I become concerned about suicide at these points. I become concerned about, like what this means. I mean, it hits such to the core of who you are is no longer. It doesn't exist. And those dark moments alone, you lose all semblances of hope and consistency. So when you say recover to me, it's like, yeah, like I'm not ever going to be okay. Am I? Question mark.
Right.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, there's a lot of gravity to that. And I do want to point out, too, that we do understand at this show there's a lot of varying relationships in different states and different countries where not all fully committed lifelong relationships are recognized. So I do want to also say that divorce, while in the United States, is referring to a married entity that in other places and other states, even outside of North Carolina, that not all intertwined relationships where everything is combined that then gets separated at the end of a relationship are recognized. So I do want to throw that out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences. And even, I'll tell you, I want to speak for all the teens around the world. Mm-hmm. When we talk about, divorce recovery versus relationships ending and whatnot, all those comments that I just made, teenagers feel too. Mm-hmm. Like I become concerned about teenagers when they're breaking up. And we minimize that now. We minimize that. We kind of think, oh, it's, puppy love. They're young. It's not a big deal. And whatever. No, listen, the teenagers that are in my office, they are feeling the full breath of like, maybe not divorce. I don't want to put, because we'll talk about the difference.
Yeah.
But that the depths of what they feel in their despair is very, very real.
Yeah. It's interesting because as a parent with all the access, we maximize accessibility for teenagers now. I feel like, I don't know how you feel, but we maximize the accessibility for these long-term relationships with teenagers.
What do you mean accessibility?
Like phone. Having a smartphone, having the person at their fingertips.
Well, yeah.
But even some of the apps that parents aren't aware of, like on Snapchat, you can get a snap map and it will show you where your significant other is all the time. Like you can do a location with them. You can share Life 360 with your significant other. And they do that. And so the healthiness of relationships is kind of interrupted by accessibility in a lot of ways for our younger teens and older teens and young adults and really everyone, I guess, at this point. But like we have that access, so we maximize access and then we minimize feelings when it comes to our younger teens, or older teens even. So I think that is something that we'll talk about today too. Yeah, and so parents, if you're listening, parents, guardians, whoever is taking care of teenagers in your life, get informed about their applications and how they follow each other because it can get unhealthy real quick. Real quick. So
absolutely. A lot of codependency, a lot of enmeshment, think about it when you just made my mind go on another journey there with the idea that their self-identity is already developing. Right. At that point. And then when they lose their girlfriend or boyfriend, it's kind of like their identity gets destroyed. So I don't want to spend too much more time on that. Right. But yeah, that's just...
That could be a whole show in and of itself.
It probably needs to be.
Hey, maybe next week.
It probably needs to be, yeah.
Yeah. So really kind of that's the definition of what we're talking about. Exactly what Chris said. When we're talking about recovery, like, am I going to be okay? How can I be okay? How do I recover from this? How do I bounce back? I am going to be using the word resiliency at some point throughout the show because it's my heartstring. Thank you.
That's awesome. In your words, I like that.
I like that a lot. Yeah. I know
that was a little sarcastic poke, but that was fun because you usually poke me, so I had to poke back.
You're welcome. I'm loving your energy tonight, so I'm feeling it. So I'm good with
Well,
it.
I felt that after I was done because it was like, look, I mean, this is just, I wanted to kind of do it a few times over, like
Yeah.
the despair that people feel, and I want people to feel hope with this episode.
Yeah.
Because there is absolutely, can I say this? There is absolutely life after divorce.
Yeah.
Okay? Totally. Now, there's some stuff to figure out. There's a lot of things to work through. I would almost make a bold statement as well. It comes to my mind in the moment. If you're going through a divorce, you need to be in therapy. Period. I think that's probably a true statement.
Agreed.
Because there's so much going on in your psyche, in your psychology, in your experience, in your loss. It is, and it's not even an event. It's a series of events that go on and on and on. I mean, in our state, in North Carolina, you can't even be divorced for a year. And there are so many progressions that go with this. It is thought of as, oh, the divorce event. This is deep, man. There's a lot of angles here.
Yeah, especially when a partner can go to another partner and say, I want to separate or I want to get divorced, and then nothing can happen for months, but we've already thrown it out there and put it out there into the universe. And now we're living together with this with us.
Don't have enough money to move.
Right.
What do I do? How do I function? I got to, what do we, who sleeps on the couch? Like, what do we, there's a lot.
Yeah, like we have some trade-offs. So how do we kind of recognize the beginning of the end? So when I say that out loud, the beginning of the end, what I am talking about or referring to is this is kind of the stage where we start to believe that the end is becoming inevitable. And there's a lot of things that can go into that. Like I said, we're not going to unpack every single instance that may be a possibility for why people may want to separate or get divorced or in their relationship, but it's starting to see those signs and feeling the strain of the relationship. So what do you see in your office, Chris, when people are coming in and they're starting to feel the strain of the relationship and seeing signs that this is not headed in a good direction?
Okay, you kept on talking, so I tuned in there, but I had to say I was tuned out because of Facebook Live. Oh my God, it's addicting. There's people there and watching, and I'm going to have to get used to this. So say again, what do I see?
Are you kidding me right now?
Yeah,
you're not paying attention.
You know what, Neil, we're gonna have to figure this out. Yeah,
I love it. No, I appreciate your honesty and your realness instead of just trying to answer a question that you have no idea what was asked.
That wouldn't work.
That would not be a sign. That would actually be good, healthy, honest communication with your partner. There you go.
There you go.
But in this stage, this is when the end is kind of becoming inevitable. So what do you see in your office as some telltale signs that relationship is just not heading in a direction?
It's an interesting question, and I'm glad I had another minute to think about it because I was going to respond in a different way.
Because you didn't listen to the first question.
No, seriously. Because look, like, yeah, there are signs that this is developing. But honestly, when it comes to hope, I'd also like to kind of put out there, I've seen all kinds of situations in working with individuals and couples. I've seen signs way early on, right when people are getting married, but then signs after the divorce. And sometimes people get back together again. Sometimes people don't. Like when I'm starting to work with relationship issues, I will tell you, I have no dog in the fight. I have no agenda. I do share that we know some statistics that, when you get married again, there are things that are repeated and the percentages are less likely to be for marriage to continue by the third or fourth. I mean, it's really bad. So I do have an agenda only in the sense of letting you know what you're getting into, because I've found people with all kinds of signs, Kasie, and they begin to really get into their work in therapy. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how to really answer your question when I see signs, because there's warning signs and flags and trouble spots, but we can deal with them. We really can deal with them. I am a little bit of a marriage advocate in that, because I know what the long-term realities of a long-term relationship can be. So I don't know if that is an answer or sounds a little evasive, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a cop-out or you're being evasive, because I do believe in the hope, and I am a marriage advocate. What I am referring to probably is something like things that are kind of telltale, like we schedule sessions for couples therapy and one person doesn't show up on a very consistent basis.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So there's no real commitment to an attempt to work through the issue. Or the person attends and says they're... And I don't mean no real commitment. I just mean it in the moment, like they're not committing to coming to therapy. So one person is showing up, the other person's not showing up. Go ahead.
How about a pause there?
Go for it. I feel like you're going to challenge most of the things I say today.
No, maybe. I don't know because I don't know what you're going to say. But there is a factor there that I think is important that gets a little bit misunderstood because engulfment and abandonment, right? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, there is a partner that's not interested in doing therapy, but they're very interested in doing marriage. And they might be very interested in going to church and talking with their friends and doing their own reading, but they don't attend therapy. So it's kind of like on the surface, I was like wanting to agree with that totally, but on the other surface, I just want to push a pause. I don't know. The signs of divorce to come I'm struggling with that, Kasie.
Well, I mean, I think that what I am saying is when we are in office with a person who's unpacking what's going on in their relationship, they've talked with us indefinitely about like what's going on. They've made a commitment to come to therapy, and then the other person just doesn't show up. So, like, I'm talking about after there's already been a commitment.
Oh, they bailed
to
and chickened
come
out
to therapy,
whatever.
and they start bailing on their partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. Not everybody wants to go to couples therapy, and I'm not saying we have to force people and that therapy is the only way, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I do think that if there is a commitment from both people to try something and then the person begins to back out, that's kind of a sign that it's not necessarily a sign, but it's a projection into the relationship and an interpretation on the part of the other person that this isn't important to you.
Yeah.
And I can see that it becoming an issue later on. Also, when there's known issues, but there feels like there is limited to no motivation to address them, this starts kind of that process. So if there's limited to no motivation to address the issues of the marriage, and it's kind of like, I'm just going to sit here and hope for change. And so we're not moving towards doing anything different.
So we're on a little segment of what are some indicators that divorce might be occurring. And I like the segment, and I really like that because that is like we got to work on our stuff. Mm-hmm. And when somebody's just not willing to do that's going to give alarm. But, I just got in touch with what I'm struggling with this segment with.
Yeah.
Kasie, I have way gotten over. Okay, so early in my career, I used to play a little game in my head, to be honest, right? Who's going to make it, who's not. I did it especially in substance abuse, right? And so who's going to stay sober, who's not. And I sucked at that game. I just sucked at it. I really struggled because I found people that are in substance abuse way gone in recovery, and then they get clean and stay clean. And then somebody who seems like they've got it all together and they're talking really well about their stuff, and then they get divorced or used in that situation. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why I'm struggling with this segment.
Yeah, and so I think that these are not absolutes, right? So we want to make that caveat, right? Like these are not absolutes. These are simply things that I see in couples when I'm working with couples, when I'm working with relationship issues, when I'm working with individuals who are going through relationship issues, when they start describing to me that anxiety is rising, the tension is rising. It's kind of like every day, maybe nothing is being argued about, but like nothing is happening in general. So that lack of motivation is just stale and stagnant. No one's making a move. No one really wants to make a move.
Or they're afraid to.
Or they're afraid to move. Or this is status quo. This is how we've been surviving, kind of like the lost decade stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So a previous show topic, lost decade, when it talks about raising kids, we've just been living together separately, dividing and conquering with our children. And now it's just us. So what do we do?
And so again, we're going to switch in here in a second to like what, we break up, what happens, and how do we get through that time frame. Right. But we never know if we're going to get there until we're really there.
Right.
And I think that's my main.
Yeah. And I would venture to say that most couples that come in together to the office do have hope. I don't think that they're showing up without a sliver of hope, at least.
Or when they come alone without their partner, honestly.
Right.
I believe in that.
Yep, I do too. And so I've even had couples, because what I like to ask at the end of the first couples session with both people in the room is, are you in, are you in, out, or are you out?
I do that too.
And sometimes I've had people that say, I'm out. And I say, will you give me 3 sessions?
Yep.
And then I do
Very cool.
individual work with one of the partners in between the 3 sessions, and we do 3 marital counseling sessions.
You never know.
And then we have some progress. And then progress leads to like, oh, okay, now we're sleeping in the same room.
Again,
Cool.
hope.
Yeah, we have hope. So I just ask that, we try it. And so I think most people that are going to show up to see us, in all honesty, do have a sliver of hope. And they do care, even if they say, I don't care. I think you do.
Yeah.
And this is why. So, but then there's people that I have seen in my office where there is no anticipation of an ending, and the person has literally planned a vacation with them and left the next day.
Oh, jeez, that's terrible.
And so I think that's something we want to talk about too, that sometimes it can feel as if it's out of left field.
Yeah.
And that's when it gets really difficult with that as well.
I'm going to be vulnerable for a moment.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to demonstrate the power of that. If you happen to follow me on social media, you saw I shared this on the Quiet Warrior. Tom Dudd is still out there. He's an awesome friend of the show. Hey, Tom, you may be seeing this because he talks about the warrior's journey and the suddenness. So this is almost divorce recovery before divorce happens. The suddenness that happens, the out of left field, is something to kind of be careful about because you couldn't be more right. Divorce recovery, can we say, happens when it begins to be discussed. And we can do that grounded, mature, and whatnot. So when I was a kid, real brief sort of part of the story here is that, when I found out my parents were getting divorced, I remember very clearly my mom was sitting over there at the table, my dad's over here. My brothers were at his seat and my sister's right here, and I'm sitting in my spot. And the first clue that I had that something was up, something's jacked up, is we were having dessert with dinner. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna say, oh shit, like something's up.
Yeah, this is big.
This is not normal. This is big. And I don't even remember what was said, who said what, but my dad was gonna move out of the house. Shot up out of the chair, ran over to his spot, and all I remember is just wildly, uncontrollably weeping, sitting in my dad's lap. And it was just such, because divorce is a family experience as well. And then, much to my surprise, it was like, okay, I don't know who said what or anything of what happened. I don't even know what we had for dessert. I don't remember because, memories can be, broken up when you're going through things like this. Well, the next thing that happened is, well, do you want to go see Dad's apartment? And I'm like, oh, okay. Walked out. Car's packed. And I just remember kind of sitting in the back seat, and I don't remember anything after that.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not the way to go when you're kind of dealing with these events in divorce. We want to, we can talk about it before, and we can kind of get a plan.
Try to unpack it a little bit.
Unpack it a little bit.
Yeah, unpack it a little bit before we pack it in the car. Yeah. No offense to Chris's dad, but
oh my God. Unpack it a little bit before we pack it
in the car. Yeah.
Right.
And then also kind of the beginning of the end is when we start having those feelings of just kind of pure resentment and bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that it's not a failure, but rather a breaking down of something, and that knowing why it's not working might mitigate some of those emotions. But I think when it gets to the point of just utter resentment, utter bitterness, and I would venture to say, and please tell me if you think differently, when it's not love or hate, but just complete indifference towards the other person's existence.
That's a bad spot.
We're heading to a bad spot.
And how about this for a fresh thought listening to you, right? One of the big factors, you may cover it a little bit with divorce recovery. Mm-hmm. Can we make the bold statement and say, you have got to figure out what wasn't working?
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, it was a bit of a fresh statement. If you're going through divorce, you need to be in therapy. I think I'll stand by that.
Yeah.
So that you can figure out what happened, because we know very clearly with emotional patterns and relationship patterns, if you don't do that, you will repeat the same things.
Yeah.
That's just the way we operate. Maybe not in dating. You get your stuff together and put a good foot forward and whatever. But when you're going through divorce recovery and you fail to figure through really internally with you, by the way, too, I'm not talking about what my spouse did wrong. What are my patterns in this? What did I contribute to the problems or the issues? And what do I need to do differently? Is that not a huge part of divorce recovery?
I think that is probably one of the most quintessential parts because two things. I love phrases and I love metaphors, but I often use the kind of, I guess it would be analogous, I don't know, of the mirror and the microscope, right? So when we operate from solely a mirror perspective, from a microscope perspective, we inspect parts of the relationship that didn't go well, and we think about themes, we think about periods of time, and we think about the partner. Like, what didn't go well? We also get into an unhealthy pattern of negative beliefs about ourselves because we're using that microscope to pick it apart and say, like, oh, if I didn't gain the baby weight, or if I didn't do this, maybe if I didn't bald, like we start picking apart those things. But the microscope really increases that level of uncertainty, anxiety, and the things that drum up a lot of big emotions that we'll talk about later.
Insecurities, rage.
Yeah. So
no, not insecurities and rage. It's an insecurities rage during this time.
I have insecurities and rage. So
and rage.
Yeah,
and rage.
I like don't let the bangs fool you in this like Taylor Swift montage, but like I can rage.
Nice.
Like
sure. Well, we all can.
Yeah, I can rage. But yes, insecurities. And so then if we're using that mirror though and really being reflective, right? Mirror, being reflective on this is not about the weaknesses that I had as a person. This is about what is right about me. What can I heal? What can I rest in? What can I let go of in order to be healthier in my next relationships? It's a reflection.
What kind of cool questions are those? What are those again?
What can I heal? What can I get rest from? What can I let go? And what can I move forward with that's right about me into my next relationship?
Those are huge.
Yeah.
Those are huge.
Yeah.
And really important parts of that process of really kind of looking inward. Because you know what?
Yeah.
When you hurt the most, you can grow the most. You ever hear that phrase?
Yeah.
Totally true?
Here's another one I like. If you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that never cut you.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
So true. Hurt people kind of.
That's true.
Yeah.
But like, just think about, I'm sure you've had a broken up relationship at some point in your dating life. I know I have, right? Like I was a serial dater at one point in my life. If any of my girlfriends are watching, we know what we refer to 2004 as, but things that shall not be mentioned on this show. No. But anyway, so in that period of time though, what I was doing is I was carrying forward all of the resentment, anger, guilt, all the things that went wrong in my last relationship and using that frame to see my next partner out of. Mm-hmm. And so when things would happen, it was almost self-sabotage because I would just be waiting for them to say something, waiting for them to do something, to mess up and get rid of the relationship because I was not going to let them leave me before I left them because I'd been left before. So, moving right along. So we're breaking up now. Now what? So what are these initial steps towards this recovery process? So step number 1, I think it's acknowledgement. This is not easy. And I know that sounds really basic, but I think that initially, sometimes, especially if we're the person initiating or if we felt held back by the relationship, it might feel freeing initially, right? Like, ooh, like this is nice, things like that. Or it might feel really kind of sad. There's a lot of emotions. But the truth is that this is not easy. In fact, this is hard. You eloquently pointed that out at the very, very beginning of the show. So the breadth of that is just accepting the fact that this is not easy. And even in elements of relationships where people have been victims of domestic violence and stuff like that, even though from the outside perspective, we were like, oh, thank God, like you've escaped the relationship, it is still a loss.
Oh, way.
It is still a loss.
Way.
And sometimes so much of a loss because not only have you lost the relationship, but you maybe have lost your friends. You maybe have lost your supports. You maybe have lost your job in that process. You
But
maybe
your
lost
fundamental
a lot of these,
identity
your
of
fundamental
self.
identity, your essential connections
Right.
go with that person.
Yeah.
So I also think about people that move to an area and don't have family here. So a loss like that goes even beyond just the loss of the relationship. So recognizing initially, like, this is hard, and accepting that it's hard and normalizing that it's hard. My next point was, allowing yourself to grieve. Like that, it is a loss. But what we want to be careful of in this period of time when we're grieving is that recognizing that it is a loss, but not becoming that emotion so in-depthly that we start to pity ourselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that goes back, honestly, Kasie, to where, again, you feel like I'm not going to be okay and all hope is lost.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get stuck in that. You can really, when people are grieving something, this is a lot initial stages of grief recovery. I mean, we could have titled this show Grief Recovery.
Oh, that's true.
And
or like Good Grief. If you
Yeah.
want to go to Charlie Brown, Good Grief.
Jesus, yeah. Because honestly, when you're dealing with that, you really do you get into a depressed state and you can feel stuck in that. And I think that's what you mean by pity.
Yeah.
Again, hope. There's hope here in renewing yourself and renewing life. And, good things happen when they break. As a matter of fact, anybody successful will tell you have to break it and build it back yourself, is what we're talking about here. But you have to break your business to build it back better. Use a current phrase, build it back better. But you can't really have new things unless old things break. So this is really an opportunity to do that, to create yourself, to re-engage yourself. And that has a lot of hope in it, I think.
Yeah, and I love the words re-engage yourself instead of reinvent yourself, because we want to make sure that you know that this is not, again, about focusing on what's wrong with you. It's about re-engaging yourself to focus on what's right about you, and knowing that there are qualities that you possess that lots of people would find to be good core value qualities. So reconnecting with what those values are, reconnecting with that core, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the solutions section, but reconnecting with that and re-engaging yourself is a really great way to do that.
You know what I don't like? Curious Facebook Live listeners, give me a comment if you like this comment. I don't like, just like a yes or no on there, because I don't like the phrase failed marriage. I don't like that phrase. I mean, I understand that we got divorced and got broken up, and now we're all of that, and there's a quote-unquote failure there. But, man, again, if we're on this hope train that we're on right now, and you're re-engaging yourself, and you're redeveloping things, and you're examining, you grow the most when you hurt the most, if that really holds true, how is that a failure? How's any of that a failure?
Yeah.
So I'm not really into the word failure with divorce recovery. How's that strike you, ma'am?
I love that. You know me, I don't like the word failure a lot at all.
Yeah.
That's not something that I like to really incorporate in part of my vocabulary, because I think everything is an opportunity for growth. But I also don't like the word failure, because I think it suggests that on the other side of the coin that there is some elusive perfect standard for what marriage has to be. Because at what standard is this a failure versus a relationship where people stay married for a long period of time, yet there's no relationship between the two individuals? They live completely separate lives. Like, is that a successful marriage because they stayed married?
That's a good point.
So I think
or
that's
if you're
where
in
I
a
get caught
domestic
up.
violence situation and you're staying married, is that a success?
Right. So is that a
Yikes.
successful relationship? Absolutely not.
Right.
And so therefore the standard by which we say what is successful and what is a failure is really self-imposed in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That's what I would say about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I don't really like absolutes. Absolutely.
We're on point there.
Yeah. So the next point is kind of what you said earlier. Like, it's not like you have to run out and necessarily have to go to therapy right away, but get help. And the way you want to get help in those initial phases is ask for help. Ask a friend. Heck, ask Google. Like,
I just saw that on here. Ask Google. That begs for an explanation.
Okay, you don't ask Google things?
I mean, I guess I do. Yeah.
First of all, I want to point out that I tell Alexa that I love her. You want to know why? Because I can ask that
yeah, I've done
robot
that.
and that AI technology almost anything. And I know there might be some stuff connected. I don't care. Like, you want to put me on a no-fly list? You go right ahead.
I've also said some pretty mean things to Siri.
Yeah, that's horrible. I don't do that. But I'm telling you that I ask Google about a lot of things, like, and especially like with my kids, like what is an age appropriate behavior sometimes. And then I get a lot of really good, and you want to make sure you're looking at the sources of the articles, but I get a lot of good, like, reviewed research on the questions that I ask. And so I think it's a great resource.
And think of this, Neil, I think we learned this on the show. Remember we were doing, what was the show we were doing on breakups, and you have breakup apps. Remember? Remember what you learned about breakup apps? And that I thought was just like a horrible idea. It was like, don't do that. But Neil, you taught me on the show what?
To read the article. No, because part of the thing is you had an assumption based on it, I did. You realized that it was apps to help you deal with breakups, not to actually break up with someone.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of stuff out there for just as much as you're trying to get connected with people. There is a lot of mental health recovery stuff that you've seen. Almost every show, there's an article or two that you've gotten off of Google. So I think that's a great resource.
So again, just another heartfelt plea when you're going through this, right? Do not be alone with this. And it's funny because we live in such an interconnected society now with the internet and these apps and Google and, but yet people feel so desperately alone because they've lost their most close life companion. And I would suggest not to be alone, even though you're going to feel like isolating, and even though you're going to feel shut down, even though you're going to feel like withdrawing and lick your wounds, and that all can be very good as well. There's a combined effort here. Get with yourself and rekindle yourself, but reach out. Don't stay. How about that? Yeah. Don't stay alone very long.
Yeah, please hear me. If I ever got divorced, I ain't gonna be lonely for long. I'm just kidding.
Well, that's a whole nother level.
No, just kidding, babe. You're like watching this. But
what did she just say?
He's also not on Facebook, so he's definitely not watching this. So. Gotcha. But no, what I love about what you said too, Chris, is that, and I do want to move us forward in a little bit, but is that, I always tell people, like, give yourself the day and then plan something for yourself the next day. And so even if that's reconnecting to yourself, getting a mani-pedi, going golfing, going to hit some balls, like, do something for yourself the next day. It doesn't have to be super self-involved. You need to take a hike.
Self-care is the cornerstone of mental health.
Give yourself the day, and then tomorrow you have a plan. Yeah. And so people take that advice, and I think that they do really well because it's that re-engagement piece with yourself. Date yourself.
How about that?
Yeah.
Nice statement. Yeah.
Date yourself. Take yourself out. Do some reflection. I think that's great.
And just a quick comment on this topic while we're here. We're not going to spend hardly any time on it, but boy, be careful about redating quickly. Just be careful. Just a comment here, but boy, you really want to be careful about redating quickly. It's you have no time to readjust what it is that you were doing in relationships. Yeah. I see that a lot in therapy.
Yeah. Rebound relationships and revenge sex never go well following right after a breakup. It can feel good in the moment. It can be a temporary fix, but the emphasis is on temporary for sure. So another caveat to kind of in this initial phases of the recovery is to monitor your health. I cannot tell people enough that the emotional experience, the mental health experience is also a wellness experience. So if you are not eating, if you are not sleeping in these initial phases, then your systems of your body are kind of trash. Going back to the whole hormone thing that we talked about when I was on the show talking about hormones, right? Monitor your health. Are you eating? Are you sleeping? If not, look for ways to get your physical health back on track. And I think this, go ahead.
Same thing with grief.
Yeah.
It's a grief and loss reality.
Yeah, it is. How do you fuel your body? What you put in is what you will get out. And so I am speaking to people who may like to self-medicate a little bit with some substances when they're feeling the brevity of grief and the gravity of grief and loss of a relationship. So if that is your typical go-to, be mindful and give yourself a day and go back and make a plan, because your health and wellness of your physical self really will determine some of the outcomes of your mental health and emotional well-being moving forward. Be weary of dwelling solely in the past. Anxiety is basically the basis of hanging out in the past or fearing the future, right? Like, I'm going to be alone forever. No one's ever going to want to marry me again. Things like that. Or dwelling in the past, like,
Again,
I'm a
insecurities
horrible
and rage.
person. Yep. Be careful about trying to be stoic. The get over it or it is what it is attitude.
Can we camp out here for a second?
Yes.
Because, my gosh. Yeah, we both hate that phrase, I think, because it just doesn't allow for the healthy processes, the weeks and months to come that you need to do. And it's just an acceptance of, I can't do anything about it. And I just don't buy that in your own life.
Yeah.
It's such a negative perspective to get into. And probably what's born from that, resentments and rage and very dangerous, bitter, broken heart that just elongates itself throughout the rest of life, literally.
Yeah.
That's not good juju right there.
Yeah. And it is an uncomfortable space. So if you have a friend that's going through that, it is an uncomfortable space. And it kind of goes back to perpetuating that attitude from some of that toxic positivity that we talked about last week, right? So sometimes we develop that get over it and is what it is attitude, because when we do lean in on our friends, they're very quick to say, like, oh, we just got to go out and get drunk and get late. Like, things like that. And that was a man voice, but my girls do that too. Like, that's like a real thing for girls too.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really about taking that time, leaning in on people who you can trust would have your mental well-being at the forefront of their thoughts when you're going through a tough time.
We have this poking thing going on, right? It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Kasie, you got to work on your man voice. I just got to tell you.
Okay. Yeah.
Solution. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we on solution focused?
We are. So this is solution focused recovery, and that's what I titled this section, because I do want to give some good takeaways on being able to kind of walk away from this episode and have some thoughts together about what to do if you do find yourself in the dismantling of a relationship. So number one,
let me just comment on that really quick, Kasie. I love. I've not heard that phrase, and I browsed the show notes before we started, and I was like, oh, okay, solution focused therapy, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay, solution focused. Okay, what does she call it? Solution focused recovery for divorce? How cool, right? Like, how cool? Because when you talk about hope and you talk about despair, and that's the dangerous, ugly, dark place that people get into, you really don't focus on, what do I do to solve the despair that I feel? What do I do to deal with the loneliness that I'm now wrought with at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning? I'm stuck and ugly and fat and dumb and weak and all, again, the insecurities are raging. If you're listening to this show in any semblance going through, relationships ending, dating, long-term relationships, or you just lost your fiance, boy, if you could switch your brain over, it's not going to take minutes and days, in weeks and months to come. Can you switch your mind over to solutions, to focusing on solutions where you can find action points and stuff? I just thought that's a cool way to focus on our segment here of how do you recover?
Yeah. And so these are action points that are, here it comes, resiliency focused,
right.
okay, but also solution focused. And so the resiliency mindset, or it really just kind of a positive mindset and flexible mindset moving forward, is basically we want to prepare ourselves to embrace the change that's about to happen, right? Because this is going to be a period of change.
Acceptance.
Yep, it's acceptance. Thank you, because I was trying not to get super clinical, but acceptance, commitment, why the rave.
Well, we just did a show on 12 steps of recovery, and I titled the show 12 Steps for All of Us. That was when I had the guest that's here. You know what their very first step is? We talked about the step work, right?
Yep, accepting. that you're an alcoholic.
Right? If you don't go there first and you don't accept what's going on, you can absolutely drive yourself batty with desperation, fighting that this is happening.
Right.
Like, listen, sister, listen, brother, like this is real.
Do you know what also the first step of acceptance is? It's the first task of grief.
Yes.
Accepting that it happened.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that it would be this. So my second point here, I love this. Separating facts from fiction, also known as over-exaggeration. So I talk a lot about this in my office. Chris hears me sometimes when he's walking through talking about facts and feelings. But I think that this is a really important point because when we get to these places and it's 3:00 in the morning and my mind is running at 100 miles per hour and I'm crying or whatever I'm doing or I'm screaming and hitting pillows or I'm drinking, I can get caught up in telling myself things that are untrue, replaying conversations and putting value on things that are simply not true.
I have a chapter on my book. Insecurities twist our thinking into wait a minute. Insecurities twist our thinking into something. Now I'm failing.
Yeah, it's okay.
Bomb.
We forgive you.
What's that?
We forgive you.
Oh man, I just crushed that.
Yeah.
But we do twist our thinking all around, and how insecurities drive that. They do act. Insecurities act as a cancer inside of us. I mean, all of these things, and I want to normalize that. Like that's a normal thing to question. You're not a bad person. You're not doing it wrong. It's very normal. You just want to catch it because. Our emotions definitely, I don't know if I said this in my book. I think I did. I say it in therapy all the time. Our emotions lie to us.
Yeah, they do.
They literally lie and make you believe that this fictional, negative, dark reality is real. And it's not.
Right.
It's
and
just
so
not.
I'm going to throw something out here that might sound a little challenging to people listening. An example that I came across, which I thought was a really good example, was even how we present what's going on in the dismantling of our relationship is also important to remain factual instead of fictional. So instead of saying, and this was the example that I found from Dr. Karen Flynn. Dr. Karen, she said, here's a good example. Instead of telling your friends, my husband left me with nothing and wants to put me and my kids out on the street.
Okay.
That is a over-exaggerated, probably response to what's happening, but it is factual to say he went to the bank and took the money out of our savings account. So
yeah, there's a switch there.
There's a switch there because one is more action-oriented, like this is what happened, this is what I have to do. I think it has a greater impact than saying my husband wants to put me and my kids out on the street. That probably was not his intention of doing that. So if we speak negativity into negative situations, we're just going to rebirth more negativity.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. That's a really good tip. I don't know that I've heard that before. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. I'm learning with that one right there for sure because, and boy, the way you speak it or think it, it creates your perception. And so what you focus on I think a lot about focus points. If you're focusing on he did this to me or she did this to me and she left me for another man and all of that, it's your perceptions are very, boy, they can drive you into the ground a little bit.
Yeah. And here comes the next point that I want to make kind of comes from a fear of engulfment perspective, right? So the longer you fight change, the longer you remain stuck. So what I want to point out here is that this is not about rolling over. This is not about you conceding victory, changing who you are, or rolling over.
I'm going to get him in court.
This is really about deciding which fight are you going to fight.
Right.
Are you going to fight the good fight and come out of this with your dignity, with your values intact? Or are you going to choose the fight to the death?
It's hard to do when the mud starts flying.
So hard.
But valuable.
But I think it's valuable, yeah. Feeling emotional mayhem is normal during this process. So if you are feeling all types of emotions, that is normal.
Be concerned if you're not.
Right. This is not about being mentally weak. I'll state that again. It's about embracing what is right about you and expanding that. So embracing what is right about you. There are some days, and this is a moment of disclosure for myself, when I will look in the mirror and I will be like, I look disgusting, But I'm like, I can go out of this house with that mindset, or I can sit here and think through what is right about me in this moment. And that is a refocus point. And some days, all I can think of, not to brag on myself, but I'm like, big old brain inside my head. I love you, big old brain. Big old lungs inside my chest. Thank you for making me breathe. It is about refocusing on what is right about you and walking out that door. And so I think the same thing about relationships. It's not about being mentally weak. Exercise is the next one.
Yeah.
Physical health, exercise. It is one of the most natural ways to deal with stress. So endorphins, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin.
Rage cleaning.
Get out into nature, get out to the gym, walk around your house. Nobody cares. Clean the house, but move your body.
Do not stay in bed.
Right. Everything inside you, because your body is trying to survive an incredibly hard emotional situation, is going to tell you to lay down. You are going to feel a heaviness in the lower extremities of your body. That's where depression lives. That's where grief lives. That's where gravity lives. That's where a lot of my fat deposits lived. I don't know, but quick joke. Quick joke, really. So basically, did you know that cellulite has a lot of salvation?
Cellulite has a lot of salvation. Okay,
Yeah.
That begs for an answer.
They've definitely accepted the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as their emotional savior, because everything else gets taken away, but they just stay with us forever. So they are eternal. That's the joke. Yeah. I almost forgot the punchline, but they're eternal.
As a dude, I'm just going to let that go.
Yeah, that's fine. But anyway, so, get up and move. So everything is going to want to bring you down, to lay you down, because that is how your brain is telling your body to survive. It's a natural process, but you have to do an opposite action. So if you feel like laying down, get up. There will be setbacks. And so just like any other recovery process, this is really about kind of like relapse prevention, right? Not to stick with the substance abuse thing, but it really is. Like, there will be times where you may backslide, because there will be reminders. There will be situations.
Did I make a mistake?
Yeah,
Should
there
I
will
have stayed
be
there?
Yeah. Or driving by a restaurant where you got engaged, or going here to this public place, or this is my favorite band. And I don't know what it is, but every time I get in the car, I hear our song and things like that. There are going to be consistent
and this
reminders.
Is months in.
Yeah,
this is months in. Because remember, this is not an event. This is something that you're going through, and you'll be going through it for a little bit.
Yeah, or the person I'm divorced from is now engaged again, or with somebody else. Yeah,
right.
And I'm still single. So there are going to be setbacks. This is about progress, not perfection. Working on recovery daily is your progress. So if you are putting in the work to work on your personal recovery daily, that's your progress. There is no element of perfection here. This is about progress. Check yourself. The better you are with checking in with yourself and tracking your emotional progress on this roller coaster, the easier it becomes to get off this ride. Relook at your confidence. Breaking up has a way of corroding your confidence.
Again, insecurities just rage and twist our brain up.
So remind yourself of your core values. If you haven't done values work, I would encourage anyone that's listening today, whether or not you're approaching divorce or the end of a relationship or not, do some values work, because connecting to your core values can assist you in so many different types of relationships.
Now, when you say values work, I want you to explain that a little bit, Kasie, because I think people get confused about that. To me, and maybe you could play off of this is re-understanding yourself. Re-understanding what you are passionate about, reinventing even sometimes, because you can. You're learning a lot through this process. Of recovering from this huge relationship loss.
Yeah, I really loved the word that you said earlier, which was re-engaging, and this is why. Because I think what happens, and it happens to everyone, so I don't want to think that this is a negative quality of relationships, but we intertwine our lives with another person, right? we don't necessarily become that person and things like that, but we build this life together where part of our identity is being, I'm Will's wife. Like that's part of my identity. I'm also Susan's daughter. I'm also the mom of Cobus and Ayla. Like I have a lot of identities, but a big part of that identity is being Will's wife. And there are a lot of values that I put towards that relationship. So if that relationship leaves, if that connection leaves, I like to have that time to re-engage to what are those values that are important to me. That if and when I am ready to seek out another partner, things that I want that person to know about me is that I value my family. Like holidays are important, traditions are important. I value family. I value my faith. These are things that are non-negotiables for me.
Can I give you a simple one?
Yeah.
I value fish.
You value fish.
I didn't even realize that, honestly, but
Or
my
eating
buddy, I
fish.
was going through something that commented at one point, and he was like, look, you've always had fish. That's always been important to you. And I'm like, you know what? It is. It is important to me. I didn't even realize that was a part of me, but I've had a fish tank. I've had a fish pond now. I've had several different meat-eating fish. And, look, the point here is that this is just you.
Right.
What makes you you? You get to be you. And that you that you enjoy, you get to celebrate and rediscover your values.
Yeah, I like my extroversion. I like that about myself. I value that about myself,
Yeah.
that I don't meet a stranger. I like that quality.
Yeah.
So reconnecting to that. So then the last one here, and if you have anything to add, I would be interested to see that as well, is remind yourself when you're putting in this effort, you are learning the recovery process. So this effort is a lot about learning. It's not about losing. It's about learning.
Absolutely. When you say, what would I add to it? The first thing that comes to my mind, I don't know if you had it on there. I don't think you did. Re-engage friendships.
Oh, yeah.
This is, again, kind of cycling back to don't be alone. You have got to let your crew pick you up. One of the coolest things, I don't know if I was going through a divorce. No, I wasn't going through a divorce.
Sorry.
When I was going through a breakup,
Yeah.
I just remember the coolness that I felt when this buddy said this to me. I must have been going through a breakup because a friend in college, looked at me. He's like, "Man, I just wanted to pick you up, dust you off, and stand you back up."
Yeah.
Matt has no idea that he did that for me, but that was huge. Like I needed somebody at that point to pick me up, dust me off, and send me along my way. And so reach out to somebody, let them know, like re-engage your friendships as much as we're talking about re-engaging you. They're still there for you, and they're valuable. They're really an important part of this. I don't know if we've highlighted the whole social, the whole engagement that you can have with your family as well.
Yeah.
Because, your family's thick and thick, through the tough times. Your friends are too. How big of an important part of, relationships ending are friendships?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when you think through the structure of those friendships and when the relationships end, who gets what friends, I would encourage you, instead of focusing on who gets what friends, to re-engage with your friends that have always been consistent.
Not to mention your belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Religion is a very big part here. I find that when people are feeling their most desperate, they will reach out to their creator. And this is a great time to really re-engage with that because depending upon your faith, tradition, and whatnot, it is, keyword, right, always available to you. Mm-hmm. Allow that to be there for you. How about that?
Yep. Hope anchors the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm. So here's my takeaway point as we kind of wrap up here. If you have some more points, first of all, I've loved doing this talkbook with you. I've learned a lot from you, and I think it was really cool for us to kind of unpack it together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
Unpack it before you repack it. Let that be a takeaway phrase, right? Forgiveness is not easy. Neither is anger. Both are hard. Choose your hard would be my first takeaway. And then sometimes forgiving yourself in a divorce or breakup situation is the hardest part. This is sometimes where those negative core beliefs lie, and we tell ourselves lies all the time when things end because we have this imaginary standard of what is failure and what is success. So my biggest takeaway, if nothing else, is be kind to yourself. Mm-hmm. It is a hard time. be kind to yourself.
And I think that I want to take us out of here with where I started, okay? Looking into the camera really at you. When you're going through this, you're going to feel like there is no tomorrow at some point. I'm never going to be loved again. I'm unlovable. All of those insecurities that rage. And, you know, one of the most important things I think that we do in therapy is offer you what I'm offering you right now, is that there is hope. There is absolutely hope for you to move on from this being possibly or likely the most toughest moments of your life over the course of the last few weeks, few months, and the months to come. I really want you to hope. I hope that you've heard the message of hope throughout this, because that, my dear friend, is absolutely there for you to take advantage of. And hopefully we've given you some things to think about through this process. But I can tell you, there is hope there. I've seen it happen, and I know people are well after this most difficult time. Okay? Kasie, we'll have you back next week.
Yeah.
Everyone, I hope you're enjoying the little development of fall that you might be experiencing. I know I am. So take care, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Take care of each other.